Hey guys, it's Sludge Factor 711, and today I'm with the Salty crew, and we're going to be discussing flanking, what it is, and why it's important. So, let's hop right into this. So first of all, before I hop into this video, I do want to say at first that this video is going to be directed to more of the lower level people in Overwatch, such as from the bronze to the gold area in competitive. Of course, flanking is still very important and used in the Grandmaster levels and most likely the top 500, but it's a lot more complicated and there's a lot more variables you have to take in consideration. So this is who that video is directed towards, more the lower level people of Overwatch. So throughout this video, I'll be showing you footage and different ways to flank and with different characters, as you see in the background. So if you learned something new or something of that nature, please leave a like. That'd be very much appreciated. But let's hop right into this, into what is flanking. So as mentioned before, flanking is a very important part of Overwatch, and it's one of those hidden components, one of those hidden variables that many people don't know of. It's not like you're a statistic that's perhaps like your average eliminations per game or your average time on fire. It's something that's a little bit more hidden in the game of Overwatch. Now, what flanking is the ability to catch the enemy team off guard, kind of throw them off their A game, and give your team the advantage it needs to get to the checkpoint or to the payload in time. So there's a lot of variables you have to take in consideration when it comes to flanking. First and foremost, the map you're playing on, your character, who's on your team, who's on the enemy team. So there's a lot of things you have to take in consideration if you're going to be taking the job as a flanker. So the first thing we'll discuss is who to choose as your flanker. Now, some things you have to take in consideration is that you have to pick someone that can get in and out of situations very quickly. Because when your fight or your situation starts to go south, that's when you want to leave and you want to make sure you stay alive. And I'll explain that later in that video, but some good examples of this are Tracer, Sombra, Reaper, Diva even with her boots can get herself in and out real quick. So you just want to pick a character that can get out of sticky situations real quickly. That's the main thing you want to remember. So the next variable is, of course, is who is on the enemy team. Now this can make a very big difference on who you choose, because let's say, for example, you pick Genji to flank with. Well, yes, Genji's a very good flanker. He can distract the enemy easily and really bother him and be an annoyance to him. But if there's a Winston on the enemy team, you're going to be useless. You're going to be dead weight to your team. You're not going to be able to do your job to the full extent. So you have to make sure you can pick a character that helps your team and that kind of counters the other enemy team. Another good example is if there's a Bastion. If their Bastion's giving trouble on your team, why not go Sombra? You can hack Bastion, get him out of his turret mode, be an annoyance to Bastion. So there's a lot of things you have to look at, especially on the enemy team. You want to be careful of who you're going up against. So of course you have to look at your own team as well. You have to pick someone that'll be effective with your team. So what do I mean by that? Let's say there's a Zarya on your team. Now, if you're going to choose Sombra as a flanker, who is a very good choice, she has many pros to her, and probably one of the best ults in the game, she would be very effective, but would she be effective with Zarya? Would she be effective with your team? You have to keep that in mind, especially with Sombra. Because if you're hacking, you need people to kill who you hack. So you have to keep that in mind. So, okay, if there's a Zarya on my team, probably a Genji or Tracer or perhaps a Reaper would be a better choice. So you want to take that into consideration when you're choosing your character. Is, okay, which character would help my team best? Which one would really be effective and combo well with who I'm playing with right now?
From the shadows.
Now, one of the next big things being a flanker to remember is not to die. Now, that's pretty much just a general rule in Overwatch altogether. I mean, no matter who you play, the less you die, the better you're going to do. But especially as a flanker, you want to be careful of this. Because let's say you are flanking the enemy team, but if you die, you're flanked with the useless. And you've now become dead weight to your team. You've now made it a 5v6 team battle. And the odds are in the enemy team now. So you have to remember not to die, which sounds kind of simple, but it's very important. Because when you do flank successfully, get in and out, throw off the enemy team, you now have, not only is it an in-game situation, but it's a mental thing as well. Knowing, okay, we have a Genji, a Sombra, a Tracer somewhere behind our enemy lines, and it kind of keeps that suspicion, that suspense on the enemy team. So this is where all the variables kind of come together. Who you pick, the map, who's on your team, the enemy team, and it's kind of your job as a flanker to know all these variables, what's going on, and to do your job properly. Because you don't want to dive in and do something stupid that'll get you killed. Because when you do that, like I mentioned before, you'll just be dragging down your team. You'll be dead weight to them. You'll be making a 5v6 and giving the odds to the enemy team. So you want to make sure you take all these things into consideration and know what you're doing, and to make sure you don't do something stupid that'll potentially hurt your team. So the last big variable we have to talk about is knowing your map. Now, throughout this video, as I brought out in the beginning, I've been showing you many different ways to flank right out of spawn. This is kind of just to help your team get moving. Now, this does not include the rest of the map, and I probably didn't cover every single way you could flank on these beginning locations. So please, if you see something I missed, or if there's a recommendation, say so in the comments, but just an FYI, I probably didn't cover everything. Now, the biggest thing that I can stress that as a flanker is knowing your map. If you know your map, I guarantee you'll be better than probably 50% of the Overwatch players. Just knowing how to get around, get to the enemy line, throw them off guard, things of that nature, it'll make a huge difference. So, some good ways of doing this are just going into a custom game with no bots, no other players, and just running around and exploring different ways on how to flank the enemy team. So right now I'll show you a very effective example of flanking on Volskaya Industries with Sombra. Now of course, Sombra isn't the only character you can use to flank. There's many other people you can use, but just keep that in mind. But this is a very effective way to flank on Volskaya Industries that can change the course of a game. Now, right out of the spawn room to your left, if you go all the way to the edge, there's a small gap between where you are and a extension of a building that you can get to that'll bring you directly behind the enemy line and the objective. Now, as we see here, we go all the way to the left, and once we get on this edge, there's the extension of that building. Cross that gap and you're in flanker heaven. You are now given the option of attacking the objective or the enemy team, and you have some cover to run to once you're noticed. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about today is once you are in flanking position, do you go to the objective or do you attack the enemy team? Now, something to keep in mind is that with these lower ranks in competitive, with these lower players, from bronze to I'd say maybe high gold, 90% of the time when you attack the objective, 2 or 3 people are going to be dropping back to check on the objective. And now when you do this, you give your team the chance it needs to get through a choke point or to get to the payload, such as Volskaya Industries has a very hard choke point to get through. You give them that opportunity they need because you just made it a 5v3. Now they can push through, eliminate those 3 players, and get in back to where you are. And hopefully those other 3 players are still trying to find you. And now the odds are heavily in your favor. It's a 6v3, and you've just captured that first objective due to your flanking. Now you could attack the enemy team as well, but this is just a little bit more complicated just because you can't take on the whole team. So you have to attack wisely. Pick your prey accordingly. If there's a Bastion, try to get him out of turret form. If there's a Mercy, take out the Mercy, so it makes your team's job a lot easier. So you want to keep that in mind if you're going to decide to attack the team instead. Well, that will end the topic of flanking for today. I hope you guys learned something new. I hope this would at least help your understanding of how to flank and how to use it in Overwatch properly. Please leave a like and subscribe. The Salty crew will be having more content coming out soon. So remember guys, stay salty.